She's recording a video she will never send. It's not for anyone in particular. Her parents are gone. Her sister stopped writing back 2 years ago. Not from anger, just from the lag and the slow drift of two lives that no longer share weather. 5 years ago, she signed a one-way contract. What kind of person does that? There are roughly 4,000 people on Mars right now. We didn't pick them at random. When the first colonist applications opened in the late 2030s, 200,000 people applied for the first ride. By the time the program closed selection a decade later, they had filtered that down to 1,200, 167 to 1 cut. Here's what's strange about the filter. It wasn't optimizing for the best engineers or the bravest test pilots, or the toughest survivalists. The selection committees figured out, painfully, over years, that none of those traits actually predicted who would still be functional on Mars at year 5. The trait that did predict it was something psychologists started calling comfortable solitude. Not loneliness tolerance, not introversion, something more specific. The ability to sit alone in a small room, without a screen, without a task, without anxiety, for a long time. To be okay with your own company. To not need the noise. It turns out the people who survive Mars are not the ones who love adventure. They're the ones who don't mind silence. Let's do the math on what that means demographically. If comfortable solitude exists at high baseline and maybe 1 in 200 adults, that's a generous estimate. And you need them to also clear a half dozen physical, intellectual, and political screens. The actual pool of people on Earth who can go to Mars is something like 400,000 worldwide, out of 8 billion, less than 1/20,000th of the species. That's your colony. Now think about the personalities that survive that filter. Almost none of them are the loud ones. Almost none of them are the founders, the entrepreneurs, the celebrities, the people whose public lives demand constant audience. The first generation on Mars is, statistically, a very quiet group of people. Watchmakers, long-distance hikers, polar researchers, Carmelite nuns who decided to apply on a whim, a surprising number of monks. The recruiters joked, eventually, that they weren't running a space program. They were running a monastery with rockets. Selection is one filter. The trip is the second. It takes roughly 7 months to get to Mars on a fast home-in transfer. 7 months in a vehicle the size of a city bus, with 5 to 7 other humans, eating from the same hydroponics, breathing each other's recycled exhalations, sharing a single shower stall. The trip is the moment the colony stops being a list of names and becomes a group. Iris flew on the Olympus 4, 3rd human-rated Mars transit, 6 crew. She has talked about that trip exactly twice in 5 years. The second time was to a junior colonist who just arrived and asked, naively, what it was like. "You forget what windows are for," she said. "You spend the first month staring out of them. By month 3, you've covered them up. By month 6, you don't remember they were ever there." Here's the thing about cohort dynamics on long-duration transits. The crews who make it are not the crews who like each other. NASA's analog studies, the year-long simulations in Antarctica and Hawaii and underwater, found over and over that the high-cohesion crews almost always cracked. Either someone got iced out, or the social pressure to keep things pleasant suppressed honest reports about problems, until the problems became emergencies. The crews that worked were the ones who were cordial professionals, who shared meals but not opinions, who said good morning and meant it, but didn't expect a long answer. Hold your beer for a second because this gets weird. In the long-duration sims, the crews that performed best had almost no friendships develop during the mission. They had alliances, they had working partnerships, they had a kind of shared mute respect, but they were not friends. The Mars colonist arrives on the surface having lived 7 months in close proximity to 5 other humans, none of whom they would have chosen to room with, all of whom they trust completely. It is, by some accounts, the loneliest kind of intimacy that exists. 5 years on a planet that does not love you back. The thing nobody warned them about in the recruitment videos and the briefings and the medical pre-flights was the slow change. Iris's bones have lost something like 14% of their density since she landed. She knows, she tracks it. Every colonist tracks it. There is an exercise regimen they call the resistance, 2 hours a day, mandatory, designed to slow the loss to something the body can still come back from. Most of them are losing the battle. If she went back to Earth tomorrow, and the contract says she cannot, she would not be able to walk for the first week. Her heart, adapted to 1/3 gravity, would labor and skip. Her vision would briefly swim. Her balance would be wrong for months. The doctor's notes from the few brief return missions called it regravitation sickness, and the recovery time scaled painfully with how long you'd been gone. But the body is the easier part. What's harder to track is the personality drift. There is a research team back on Earth, Roscosmos funded, Russians who never stopped studying mere cosmonauts after the Soviet collapse, who have been tracking what they call the return home affect, the change in personality that long-duration crews exhibit when they come back. Returning cosmonauts are reliably quieter, slower to speak, less eager to socialize. They smile less, not because they're depressed, but because the smile as conversational token apparently atrophies in environments where there are too few people to use it on. They prefer small groups. They find Earth's weather overwhelming, the unpredictability of it, the way the sky just does whatever it wants. They are, in essence, more monastic on the way back than they were going up. Iris recorded her first video message to Earth on day 14 of the surface mission. It was 4 minutes long, in full sentences, animated. The one she's recording tonight, on year 5, day 1792, is mostly silence, long pauses between thoughts. The Russian researchers would tell you that this is not a problem. This is what the first generation becomes. It is the human animal adapting faster than anybody expected. And if you stretch this out, 20 years, 50, 2 generations, 3, you start to ask a question that the recruiters never put on the brochures. When does a Mars colonist stop being human in the way that we are human? When do they become something else? Iris finishes the recording. She doesn't watch it back. None of them do. The video goes into a folder on her drive, and the folder is, at this point, 412 videos deep, and she has never opened any of them again. She told the junior colonist, the one who asked about the trip, that she doesn't know who the videos are for. Maybe a daughter she will never have. Maybe a version of herself who needs to remember she was here. Maybe a researcher 50 years from now, trying to understand what these people became. This is the first generation. They are quieter than us. They are more patient than us. Their bones are different. Their reflexes are different. Their relationship to silence is different. And they are still, by any definition we know how to apply, fully human. The question is, for how long? If you like this, subscribe. The next one's about what happens when the first humans are born up there, the ones who will never come home.